Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive, absolutely world-changing story. We're diving into the dramatic, complex, and deeply human history of India's journey to independence. From the chaos of global wars to the birth of entirely new nations, this is a phenomenal piece of history that literally redrew the map of the world.
Here is a quick look at how we're going to break this all down today. We'll start with World War II, move into the fight for freedom, explore the demand for Pakistan, discuss the heavy price of independence, and finally look at how they went about building a united India.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1. World War II begins, a world at war. So, picture the year 1939. The world is basically splitting into two massive camps. On one side, you've got the Allied powers. That's Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and the USA. And up against them are the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, as Japan is pushing closer and closer to Asia, Britain realizes they are in a very vulnerable spot. They desperately need the people and the resources of India to help them fight and win this massive global conflict.
But Indian leaders saw this and basically said, look, we'll help your fight, but you have to promise us total, complete freedom the second this war is over. Seems like a fair trade, right? Well, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill flat out refused. He had absolutely zero intention of letting go of India. And in protest of that refusal, many Indian leaders who were actually holding positions in the local government just up and quit their jobs all at once.
Moving right along to Section 2, the fight for freedom and the completely different paths to get there.
Now this is where things get really fascinating, because you have two legendary leaders stepping up to challenge British rule, but their playbooks could not be more different. On one hand, Mahatma Gandhi deeply believed in peaceful resistance. He was organizing these massive, nonviolent marches, telling the British to, quite literally, quit India. But then you have Subhas Chandra Bose. He believed that, well, you can't defeat an empire without a strong army. So he secretly traveled abroad, formed alliances, and actually built the Indian National Army, using Indian prisoners of war to fight back militarily.
As you might guess, things escalated super quickly from here. After the Congress Party resigned in 1939, the British tried to negotiate a deal in 1942, but it failed entirely because they still wouldn't promise that full independence. That exact same year, Gandhi launches the Quit India movement, which leads to the British arresting thousands of Indian leaders. And meanwhile, over in 1943, Bose is officially forming his army outside the country, getting ready to strike from beyond India's borders. So, the British are finally weakening. Between the astronomical cost of the global war and this intense, relentless pressure from Indian resistance, independence is becoming totally inevitable. But a massive question starts looming over everyone. Who is actually going to lead a newly free India? See, for a long time, the British had maintained control by playing different groups against each other, especially Hindus and Muslims. Now that the British were packing their bags, figuring out who was actually in charge became a huge, explosive problem.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, the demand for Pakistan, a divided nation. Here is a wild piece of history for you. You know Muhammad Iqbal? He wrote a super famous unifying Indian patriotic song. But ironically, he was actually one of the very first people to suggest splitting the country up. Back in 1930, he put forward the idea that since Muslims were the majority in the Northwest, they should really have their own separate, self-ruled area. Now at the time, this was just kind of a distant theoretical thought. But then, in 1933, a young Cambridge College student named Chaudhry Rahmat Ali printed up a pamphlet and actually gave this idea a name, Pakistan. Now, older politicians, they completely dismissed it at first. They thought it was just some student's totally unrealistic dream. But as arguments between Hindu and Muslim political groups grew louder and honestly much more intense throughout the decade, that little dream morphed into a very serious demand. Now, the Congress Party, they claim they spoke for absolutely everyone in India, regardless of religion. But Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, pushed back hard. He argued his group was the only true voice for Muslims. And when major elections rolled around in 1946, the results were staggering. The Muslim League won an overwhelming 86% of the Muslim vote. I mean, that is a massive display of influence.
So, armed with that massive victory, Muhammad Ali Jinnah proved his party undeniable power. He started arguing that if India stayed united, Muslims would always be outnumbered and their rights could just be ignored by the majority. Because of that deep-seated fear, he demanded a totally separate nation. Just like that, the long-held dream of one big, united, independent India was officially shattering.
And this takes us into our fourth section, the price of independence, breaking the pot.
Things, unfortunately, take a very dark turn here.
Because the different political groups just could not find a way to agree on sharing power, Jinnah called for something called Direct Action Day in August 1946 to demand Pakistan. Tragically, this sparked massive, deeply deadly riots between communities, especially over in the city of Calcutta. The British, realizing they had completely lost control of the situation, decided to just rush their exit and formally split the country in two by August 1947.
Think about the partition of India, like taking a beautiful, intricately made clay pot and just smashing it on the ground into two pieces. It was violent, it was messy, and it was entirely irreversible. You simply can't just draw a neat little line on a map where people of different faiths have lived together as neighbors for hundreds of years. This sudden split created the independent nations of India and Pakistan, for sure, but those new borders cut right through villages, through homes, and through families.
1.5 million. Just pause and think about that number for a second. That is the heartbreaking, estimated number of people who lost their lives. Millions more were forced to pack up literally whatever they could carry and flee across these brand new borders. Hindus and Sikhs moved in huge, desperate crowds toward India, while Muslims traveled toward Pakistan. They faced terrible, unimaginable violence along the way, in what became one of the largest mass migrations in all of human history.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Building a United India, Healing and Uniting. Right in the middle of all this unimaginable chaos and migration, the newborn country gets hit with absolute heartbreak. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, refused to even celebrate independence. Instead, he traveled directly into the worst of the riot areas, fasting and just begging for peace between Hindus and Muslims. But tragically, on January 30th, 1948, a radical extremist who hated Gandhi's message of peace and unity shot and killed him. Despite mourning this colossal loss, the newly free Indian government didn't even have time to catch its breath. They faced another monumental puzzle, represented by this daunting number, 550. See, when the British left, they didn't just leave behind one big, unified country. About a third of India was actually ruled by 550 different local kings and princes who had their own special deals with the British. With the British suddenly gone, all 550 of those kingdoms were now technically independent states.
So who do you call to put a 550-piece puzzle back together? Enter Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, famously known as the Iron Man of India. He took on the seemingly impossible job of convincing every single one of those royals to give up their crowns and join the new democratic India. And the stakes were incredibly high. If he failed, India would literally shatter into hundreds of tiny, separate countries right out of the gate.
But Patel was honestly just a master negotiator. He essentially used a three-step playbook. First, he offered the princes the full military protection of the new Indian army. Second, he promised them a privy purse, which was basically a giant guaranteed allowance so they could maintain their lavish royal lifestyles. In exchange, they just had to sign a contract handing the Indian government control over major things like defense and communications. Amazingly, almost all of them signed, officially gluing the map of India back together.
So wrapping this all up, India's journey from a colonized land to independent nations is this colossal story of sheer bravery, deep tragedy, and some pretty incredible puzzle solving. The borders that were drawn back in 1947 didn't just divide up the land, they forever changed the lives of millions and completely shaped the world we are living in right now. So we want to leave you with this huge question to think about. Considering the immensely high price of this freedom, how does the legacy of that historic partition still impact South Asia today? Keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and we'll see you in the next explainer.